First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Galatians, the 3rd chapter. As Paul, in his letter to the churches in Galatia, after hearing about their, some of them being affected by Jews that were going and basically pushing the salvation through the law and circumcision on them. So this is Galatians chapter 3, verse 1. O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you, that ye should not obey the truth? And to be bewitched is like, to be put under a spell. And so as Paul is saying here, obeying the truth, which was what he had taught them when he was first there. So he's saying who has corrupted your minds to where now you're turning away from the faith and starting to lean towards thinking that righteousness comes by the law. And that's why he goes into the chapter and expounds on the difference, and what the actual purpose of the law was for, and how faith in Yahweh Shai is really it was the end goal from the start, right? It was never salvation was never gonna come by the law. So as he says here, before whose eyes, meaning that was before their eyes, Yahweh Shai hath been evidently set forth, crucified among you, and he's referring to how he preached, right, and taught and made it evidently, or abundantly clear, right, the things Yahweh Shai went through, who he was, right before their eyes, as he taught them. This only would I learn of you. So in modern day English, it's like saying, just at least tell me one thing, right? Tell me this one thing. Received ye the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? So the Spirit that the Lord put upon you, right, to believe, did that come by way of the law, of keeping the law, or doing the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Because it was through the preaching of faith that you heard and believed and received the Spirit. It wasn't because you were keeping the laws, and if you were, then they wouldn't have had to come to you and tell you to come and keep the laws and circumcise yourselves. Are ye so foolish? Having begun in the Spirit, are ye now made perfect by the flesh? So as he's explaining, the spirit of faith, right, and your belief in Yahweh Shai came and begun by the Spirit. And do you think that the works of the flesh, right, or the works of the law it's what's going to make you perfect? That's not what gave you the Spirit to believe in the first place. Have ye suffered so many things in vain, if it be yet in vain? So all the things that you went through, right, the whatever it may be that you suffered at the hands of believing in Yahweh Shai, right, and coming into the faith and the laboring and all the things all the work you've done so far, was it all in vain? As he says, if it be yet in vain. So you can hear in the tone of Paul's voice, as he mentions, even in the subsequent chapters, he's like concerned, right, but also hoping that it's not going in the direction that he thinks it is. And he mentions that to them, right, that he hopes that he won't have to stand in doubt whether they are going to maintain the faith or not, lest all his work that he has done be in vain. And remember, once again, these churches here, right, Antioch, Iconium, Lystra, Derbe, like the regions about, these were established, right, set up with believers when Paul went there on his first missionary journey with Barnabas. And he spent a good while over there and suffered many things for their sake. Verse 5. He therefore that ministereth to you the Spirit, that is the Most High that gave you the Spirit, and worketh miracles among you, doeth he it by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith. So was it by you keeping the laws that the Most High gave you the Spirit, or that he had the miracles be performed among you? Or was it by your hearing of faith? Hearing of faith meaning like they heard what was being preached about the faith in Yahushua, and they believed it, and they had faith. And through that, Paul is making mention here, like, really think about this, right? You're trying to revert to a means that was not by which you gained the Spirit. It wasn't by which you saw the miracles. That's not even how you started your journey. Your foundation is in the faith of Yahushua. So why resort to the works of the flesh as though that had, that is what got you here in the first place? Even as Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness, right? So by Abraham's faith in the Lord counted that to him for righteousness. Know ye therefore that they which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. Okay, so just like Abraham had faith, those that have faith in Yahushua are the true descendants or the true children of Abraham. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith. The heathen here are Israelites that would be, that would not know they were Israelites, that were living amongst the heathen. And so the scripture, foreseeing, looking ahead and seeing that God would make righteous the Israelites that were amongst these heathens that had, gone astray through their faith, not through their works of the law, but through their faith. And so foreseeing that, preached or declared before the gospel onto Abraham. And when you go into that word, preached, preached before the gospel. That's a pretty long Greek word that I'm not going to try to pronounce, but the definition is really what we are interested in here, right? To announce or promise glad tidings beforehand, i.e. ahead of time. So the scriptures foreseeing that eventually the Lord would do this, right? Justifying these Israelites that were in a heathenistic state through faith, i.e. bringing them back to the fold, preached or declared, right, before onto Abraham, saying, in thee shall all nations be blessed. And these nations are referring to first and foremost, the Israelites, okay, that were scattered also amongst these different nations. And they would be blessed through faith, okay, just as Abraham had faith. So then they which be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham. So the blessing wherewith Abraham was blessed, they would attain that as well. Why? Because they also had faith, just as Abraham had faith. So as many as are of the works of Salakia, for as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. And the curse is the penalty of breaking the law, right? So if you are under the works of the law, you live by the law. You have to keep the laws, and if you break them, you would suffer the penalty or the curse of the law. So you're under the curse if you live by the works of the law. For it is written, cursed is every one that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. And that's quoting the book of Deuteronomy 27 and 26. If we cross-reference this here, I believe it should show up. Interesting. Okay. So it's refusing to show up here. Okay, well, I gave you the precept, so you know what Paul was quoting here, and you can read it. It's the same thing that it says. Verse 11, but that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God, it is evident. See, so it's evident that nobody was, and when you go into that word justified, hopefully this will actually load. Not sure why it's not loading at all, if it's from the blue letter side or it's from the blue letter side. But when you go into that word justified, it also goes into being made righteous. So it's evident that no man would be made righteous in the sight of God by the law. That is apparent. The just shall live by faith. So that's why, or rather, those that the just are also those that are righteous. So the righteous wouldn't be made righteous by the way of the law, but rather they would be made righteous by living in faith, all right, or having faith in Yahushua. And the law is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live by them. Yeah, because when it comes to the law, it's not based on faith. But when you keep the laws, or when you live by the laws, or when you keep the laws, you have to live by them, right? Meaning that so long as you continue to keep those laws, you will live. But if you break them, you will be under the curse. Hamashiach hath redeemed us from the curse of the law. So what is the curse of the law? The penalty of breaking the law. And here Paul is saying that Yahushua redeemed us from that, right? When you redeem something, like even if it was a servant who was a slave, an Israelite who was a slave, and their family member came to redeem them, they'd have to give something in return for that person. That's how you redeem something. If you go to redeem a gift or, a coupon, or, you don't redeem a coupon, but you use it to redeem something. You give something to get something. That is how you redeem. So Yahushua redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. So we incurred the curse, but we were redeemed by him. So he took the curse upon him to redeem us from it. For it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. All right, and that's in Deuteronomy 21 and 23, and I can't pull it up because the blue letter's acting up. So by Yahushua going on that cross, he redeemed us from the curse of the law by taking that curse upon him, being made a curse for us in our stead, that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles, which are Israelites, okay, through Yahushua Hamashiach. So these Gentiles were Israelites, believers that weren't born into the customs of Israel, right, of Jewry. But this was done, as it says, that the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Yahushua. So they would get the blessing of Abraham, being they were Abraham's seed, but they would get it not by keeping the law, but by their faith in Yahushua, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. See? So the promise of the Spirit, just as the apostles received it, right, and those others that believed in Yahushua received it, as the Apostle Paul is saying here, we would receive it through faith, right, by believing in Yahushua, not through the works of the law. Brethren, I speak after the manner of men. So here he says, I'm going to use an everyday example, right, a practical day-to-day example. Though it be but a man's covenant, so even, when dealing in matters of, let's say it's not anything divine, yet if it be confirmed, and this covenant is like an agreement, whether it's like a will or something like a contract, something that's you can't undo. You can't, once it's set, it's set. So he's saying even when dealing with men, when you have an irrevocable covenant, if it be confirmed, once it's sealed, no man disannulleth or addeth thereto. So you can't make it void, and you can't add anything to it. Like if somebody had a will, once they die and that will is like, put into effect, you can't change it. So even when dealing with us, like life on earth, you have situations like this, right? Where there are certain things that are set, so a covenant or a deal or a contract that's set, and it can't be revoked or changed or added to. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and to seeds as of many, but as of one. So Paul is saying here, the Lord made the promise to Abraham and his seed, but Abraham had multiple seed or seeds, right? Another term for seed is children. So Abraham had multiple children, but the Lord said to Abraham and his seed, his child. So Paul's emphasizing here that even though Abraham had sons by Keturah and he had Ishmael by Hagar, he had Isaac, which is the seed that here is being referred to. So it says here, he saith not, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Hamashiach, which is Yahushai, the anointed. Now, this is it's what Paul's saying here is spiritual, right? In the sense that Yahushai was the seed of promise, okay, through Abraham. Now, he was a descendant of Abraham, right? He came through the line of Abraham, but through the Spirit, he was also the actual seed, the child of Abraham, Isaac. So Isaac was an incarnate, or Yahushai, Isaac was an incarnation of Yahushai. Let me say it that way, okay? In that lifetime, all right. And we believe that through the Spirit, through faith, and also through the words that are written here. And Paul understood that. Okay. So Paul here identifies the seed of Abraham as Yahushai. He says it right there plainly. But as of one, and to thy seed, which is Hamashiach. So the seed of Abraham is Hamashiach. But we know that the actual, seed of the promise was Isaac. So how do you reconcile the two? Because that was that same Spirit. So keep that in mind, because it's gonna make more sense why he mentioned or identified the seed with Hamashiach as we go on down into the subsequent verses. Verse 17. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of God in Hamashiach, the law which was 430 years after. So the covenant that the Lord made with Abraham was confirmed with Abraham's seed, which is Hamashiach. That's why he said it was confirmed before of God in Hamashiach, which was Abraham's seed. All right. And just like Paul, that's why he gave the example above, that once a covenant is confirmed, even amongst men, it can be disannulled. Well, here, the Lord confirmed the covenant with Abraham through his seed, which is Hamashiach. The law, which was 430 years after, cannot disannul, right? Because Abraham's time was prior to the law, statutes, and commandments being actually, given through Moses, right? Because we know that the main core of the laws, right, they existed, but they weren't codified, all right, and officiated as during the time of Moses. So what Paul's saying here is the law during the time of Moses came 430 years after this covenant was already confirmed with Abraham. Therefore, this law that came after cannot disannul that it should make the promise of none effect. That's why he gave the example up above, that just like when you deal with, carnal, every day-to-day life, once, where is it? Did I already pass it? Yeah, verse 15, right? That once a covenant is confirmed, no man is able to disannul it. So he's saying the covenant was confirmed with Abraham. The law cannot disannul that 430 years after. So if by faith you would receive the promise or the blessings of Abraham, somebody cannot, and that faith is in Yahushai, somebody cannot come and tell you that the law that came 430 years after that is going to make void that faith that you have. They can't come and tell you that no, the righteousness, the justification, the promise, the salvation, that's going to come by the law, not by faith. Because if that's the case, then the law, which came 430 years after, would be disannulling the promise, or that would come by faith. That's why he says here that it should make the promise of none effect, because the promise, as Paul's going to mention, is not contingent upon keeping the laws. When you promise something to someone, that's not based on what they are doing. It's if you say, I promise I'm going to do this for you, by your word, you have already sealed that, regardless of what they do. So verse 18, it says, for if the inheritance, right, which was part of the blessing that was given to Abraham or promised to Abraham, even Stephen mentioned this, right, in Acts the 7th chapter. He said that when Abraham got into the land, he wasn't given an inheritance, no, not even a portion to set his foot upon, but it was promised to him and to his seed. See? So it was given to him as a promise. So it says here, for if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of promise. So if the inheritance that was given to Abraham has to be attained by keeping the law, then it's no more a promise. But God gave it to Abraham by promise. So he's telling the Galatians, the churches in Galatia, don't let somebody come and tell you that you can't attain these things except you keep the law, because the promise that was given wasn't even based on the law. Verse 19, wherefore then serveth the law? So if that's the case, then what was the purpose of the law? It was added because of transgressions. So because of the, really, when you have the law, if you had a society, a utopia, you wouldn't need laws, right? If everybody just did what they were supposed to do. Why do you have laws? You have laws for transgressors, so they don't transgress. So the Lord, seeing the transgressions of Israel, gave us the laws till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. Now I'm gonna I'll see if I can pull it up here, but if I can't, all right, you know what? Let me try one more thing. Verse 19. Let's hopefully refresh. Okay, maybe that's worse. All right, we'll keep it as us here, and I'll read the NLT on my phone here. All right, once it decides to load. Okay, so this is Galatians chapter 3, though there might be something wrong with the blue letter servers right about now. All right, in any case, let's go ahead. So in 19, it says here, it was added because of transgressions till, okay, I think it's loading now. Galatians 3. Till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. So who was that seed that should come to whom the promise was made? Yeah, Hamashiach, right? Remember, we read up above where Paul mentioned, which is thy seed, right? Promise that was made to thy seed, which is Hamashiach. So, as the Apostle Paul is mentioning here, that the law was given because of transgressions, but the law was really, as he's going to go into, supposed to be like a tutor, okay, or a guard until Hamashiach should come, right? The seed should come to whom the promise was made, and it was ordained by the angels in the hand of a mediator. You know what? I'm going to try to pull this up because the blue letter is acting up. So let me just pull it up regularly here. Galatians 3 and 19. Because I like the way that it worded it. I think it makes it a bit clearer. Right. So it says here, Galatians 3 and 19 in the NLT. Why then was the law given? It was given alongside the promise to show people their sins, but the law was designed to last only until the coming of the child who was promised. God gave this law through angels to Moses, who was the mediator between God and the people. Okay, so Paul letting you know there how those laws were given through the angels. Okay, so here it's letting you know, right? And Paul, once again, he's gonna expound upon that a bit more. But he's the overall point he's making here is the law was never meant to be the end goal. The Lord it was evident nobody would be made righteous through the law. So it was never meant to be the end goal. That's not what was going to justify you or make you perfect. That was temporary until the one that would actually make you perfect should come, which is Yahushua. Verse 20, now a mediator is not a mediator of one. Meaning when you have a mediator, one that goes between, the job of a mediator is really to mediate between two parties. But God is one. So when it came to the promise that the Lord had with Abraham, he didn't need a mediator because it was a promise that he gave to Abraham. It is the law then, or is the law then against the promises of God? God forbid. So is the law contradictory or conflicting with the promise that the Lord gave? No. For if there had been a law given which could have given life, verily righteousness should have been by the law. See, so he's saying, look, it's not like you have the law that can make you righteous or give you life, and then you have the promises or you have the faith, which is on the other hand, and they're just like conflicting with each other. You don't know which one to do. No, they have different purposes here. And he's saying there wasn't the law could not give you that new life, right? By keeping the law, you weren't going to get that path, like that new life that you would through Yahweh Shai. Because if that was the case, then righteousness should have been by the law. But as we know, that's not the case. Righteousness didn't come by the law. Verse 22, but the scripture hath concluded all under sin. So everybody is, considered a sinner, really, right? I think the scriptures tell you that all have fallen short, right? Have come short of the glory, right? Roughly paraphrasing. So reading this in the verse 22 in the NLT, it says, but the scriptures declare that we are all prisoners of sin. So we receive God's promise of freedom only by believing in Yahweh Shai HaMashiach. So by the scriptures, what was it worded? Declaring, right, that we are all sinners, that is proving that we had the laws, but still the scriptures declared that we're all sinners. So that proved that the laws weren't what's going to make you righteous. And that also made way to then say, well, if you're not going to be made righteous by the law, you need another way, right? Which, as it says here, is that the promise by faith in Yahweh Shai might be given to them that believe. So by believing in Yahweh Shai, not by keeping the laws, but by believing in Yahweh Shai, you would be able to receive the promise. But before faith came, so how did faith come? By Yahweh Shai. Before that faith in Yahweh Shai came, because Yahweh Shai had to come on the scene, we were kept under the law. And I really hope this thing works now, because it's yes, 8 Okay. So this is more helpful when we go into the some of these words here, right? So Paul is saying before faith came, we were kept under the law. And when you go into that word kept, it says here to guard, right? Metaphorically, under the control of the Mosaic law, that he might not escape from its power, to protect by guarding, to keep, to by watching and guarding, to preserve one for the attainment of something. So the Lord gave us the laws, not because that is what would give us the end goal, but the job of the laws were to keep us in check until what would actually make us righteous should come on the scene, which is faith in Yahweh Shai. That's why it says here, we were kept under the law. So the job of the law was to guard or preserve one for the attainment of something. So, like I said, from the beginning, the laws were never the end goal. But the job of the laws were to keep us in check, was to preserve us so we wouldn't go so far off that we would just be destroyed before we could even get a chance through believing in Yahweh Shai. So we were kept under the law, shut up onto the faith, which should afterwards be revealed. And let's go into that word shut up as well. So it says here to shut up and close, to enclose, to shut up completely. So it's like being confined. So that's what the Lord did, right? He put the laws as guardrails to confine us and to preserve us in a certain way until the time of Yahweh Shai, where we could then, through faith, be made perfect, be made, justified. It's like when you have a tricycle, and for somebody who's learning how to ride a bike, and the tricycle is the extra wheels, while you still don't know how to ride the bike yet, are to keep you from falling, to keep you on the right path. And then once you get the hang of it and you know how to ride the bike, they remove those. So that was the job of the law, to preserve us and keep us in the right path until we were to get to the point of Yahushai having that faith. Verse 24, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us onto Hamashiach. See, because Yahushai, there was a certain appointed time that he would come on the scene. So what were we to do until then? That was the portion in which the law's job was for. Now let's go into that word schoolmaster. It says a tutor, i.e., a guardian and guide of boys. Among the Greeks and the Romans, the name was applied to trustworthy slaves who were charged with the duty of supervising the life and morals of boys. Is that not what the law did for us? The job, the law, that's why the Lord said that you would, write it upon your doorpost, keep it in your mind, and it would supervise our lives and our morals. As it says, of boys belonging to a better class. And guess what? It was given really only to us, not to the other nations, because Israel was likened onto a better class, a higher class than the rest of the nations. The boys, and the Lord gave this to us when we were young, right? As a nation, when we just formed as a nation, he gave us the tutelage of the law, that it should supervise our lives and morals until we were at the age of Yahushai coming, and then we would not need the tutelage of the laws anymore. So it says here, the boys were not allowed so much as to step out of the house without them. That is, without the tutor or the schoolmaster, before arriving at the age of manhood. So it wasn't forever. You don't have a tutor forever. You only have them for as long as is necessary. And our spiritual arriving at manhood was when the faith of Yahushua was preached. But until then, we were under the supervision and were not allowed to go in whatever way we wanted to because of the laws. So going back to Galatians chapter 3, verse 24, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to supervise us, to bring us onto Hamashiach. Because no matter what we did, it was a matter of time. And until the time that the Most High would send Yahushai so that he could do what he did, then we could have the faith in him and believe and gain that true way to perfection. We needed something to keep us in line until then, that we might be justified by faith, right? And let's go into that word justified. To render righteous, or such as he ought to be. You see? To declare, pronounce one to be just, righteous, or such as he ought to be. So righteousness came or comes by faith in Yahushai. The law was to preserve us and keep us in check until we could be made fully righteous by the faith in Yahushai. Verse 25. But after that faith is come, we are no longer under a schoolmaster, because its job is now done. Okay, it has brought us to where we needed to be to attain that righteousness, to be made righteous, and that is through the faith in Yahushai. So we were preserved through the law, but now that the faith in Yahushai has come, which is the way, that was the Lord's plan from the start. So our righteousness was never going to be through the law; it was going to be through faith in Yahushai. And now that faith in Yahushai has come, we no longer need the tutelage of the of the schoolmaster. For ye are all the children of God by faith in Yahushai Hamashiach. And that's why the Lord still blessed them with the Spirit, even though they weren't keeping the laws from their youth on up. So how then and why would the Lord still bless them with the Spirit and with faith and perform miracles amongst them? For as many of you as have been baptized into Hamashiach have put on Yahushai. And so being baptized into the faith, putting on Yahushai is likened on to, putting on the mind of Yahushai per se, right? Living after the deeds of the faith in Yahushai. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free, and as it says, there is neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Hamashiach Yahushai. Now, it doesn't mean that because regardless, in the believers, if one was an Israelite that was a Greek, they had Greek customs, they were raised in the Greek factions, they were still, that was still them. They didn't just become like a nothing. And if you were raised as a Jew in the Jewish customs, you were still that. But what the Apostle Paul is saying here is there is no distinction when it comes to those that are in the faith, meaning we're all looked at as servants of the Lord, believers, right? As to where in the world, one that is a Jew would look at one that is a Greek like, you're unclean, you got to stay away from me. They would treat them different based on their class. One that is a slave, right, a servant that is bond, or one that is free would be looked at as different and treated differently based on their status. But in us all being servants of Yahushua, you don't do that. You don't look at another brother or another believer and say, "Oh, he's a servant or a slave, so I'm gonna treat him differently." No, that's what Paul means by "ye are all one in Hamashiach." Right? We're all on one accord. We're of the same spirit. Now, when it says there's neither male nor female, it's really just still making the point of us being all on one accord with Yahushua, because whether you're male or female, if you have faith in Yahushua, you still believe the same thing. It doesn't mean that, oh, there's neither male nor female, so now a woman can usurp authority, or she can be equal to a man because there's no difference. No, there's still going to be a difference. But Paul means in the mentality. Verse 29, and if ye be Hamashiachs, then are ye Abraham's seed and and heirs according to the promise. Because once again, when you go back up a couple verses, like he mentioned, the seed, which is Hamashiach. So if you're Hamashiachs, then you are Abraham's seed. And if you're his seed, then the things that were promised to Abraham, you would inherit, being heirs to the promise. And Salaki about it not loading so fast. I'm not sure why the internet was moving so slow. But that brings us to the end of Galatians, the 3rd chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachak, Wadash. And until next time, Shalom.